Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Kay, and today we're going to be doing a basic EKG review. This is actually going to be part 1 of our series, and we're going to be talking about sinus rhythms. Now, one thing that I want you to remember about sinus rhythms is that they all have upright P waves. And I really want you guys to pay attention to the P waves because sometimes they can be inverted, but that makes it a different kind of rhythm. Okay, so on our itinerary today, we're going to talk about normal sinus rhythms, sinus arrhythmia, bradycardia, tachycardia, sinus exit block, and sinus arrest. And make sure that you are paying attention because we will be doing a quiz every Friday until this series is completed. And I want you guys to guess the rhythm. All right, so let's get started. All right, guys, so this is a recap of a video I've done in the past. This is my thought process when I'm trying to measure EKGs. And I think this is very important because it gives you an idea of what to look for. Okay, so make sure that you take a screenshot of this and also watch the video I've done in the past on how to measure an EKG, and also the video where I talk about the different waves of an EKG. I want to bring your attention to this website. This is called Skillstat.com, and it's the 6-second EKG. This website was very helpful for me when I was learning because they have a game that you can play. You can learn about the different rhythms. They have different modes. If you want the EKG to be in motion, you can click on dynamic EKG. If you want it to remain still, you can put it on static mode. And you can also play games. Let's say I want to play for a minute. I'll put it on 1 minute in the settings. So if I'm learning about different rhythms, I can learn and they'll give me some information and also show me what the rhythm would look like on a monitor. And then I could play a game to test my knowledge, and I really like that. So here, let's see if I can get this right. Yep, I got it. Let's see, this one looks like a pacemaker. Let's see, atrial pace. Where's that? I got it. Okay, so if you keep practicing, I just used to challenge myself. I would, change the time for the game. For example, I'll play for like 2 minutes and I'll see if I can do really well and get all of these right. And over time, I started to get more and more correct because that showed I was really learning this stuff. So I love this website. Another website that I really like is called practiceclinicalskills.com. And with this website, it's similar to the static EKG because what you can do is learn about different rhythms and then also play a game. So with this one, it gives you like a little synopsis on the key features of, for example, normal sinus rhythm. And then the cool thing about it is that you have real life calipers, so I can actually measure this rhythm and practice doing that using calipers. So I think that's really cool. All right, so the first rhythm that we're going to go over is normal sinus rhythm or sinus rhythm. And the rate is usually 60 to 100 beats per minute. The P wave is upright. So you got to make sure that it's upright because if it's inverted or upside down, that means that it's a different kind of rhythm. So you got to pay attention to that P wave. The PR interval is 0.12 to 0.20. The QRS is 0.06 to 0.10 seconds. The QT is 0.35 to 0.44 seconds, and the R to R, which is the rhythm, is regular. All right, you guys, so this is our sinus rhythm. So on an EKG strip, we would write SR for sinus rhythm, or NSR, normal sinus rhythm. Okay, and we have to make sure we have our waves because with a normal sinus rhythm, we have all of our waves. So we have the P wave, and they have to be upright. Okay, and they have to be like this. If your P waves are like this, U-shaped, that means that it's a different kind of rhythm. Okay, so it cannot be U-shaped. So we're looking at all our P waves. We have it here. Okay, let's do a different one. And then we have our QRS. Okay, so this is our QRS. It's right here. We don't have anything dropping. And then we have our T wave. Let's see, what color? Let's make it pink. Okay, so we have our T wave and it's upright. Okay. Okay, so we also have to take a look at the R waves. Okay, so here, the distance from here to here, so the distance from one wave to another has to be equal. Okay, so if I'm using a caliper to measure the distance, it has to be equal or regular. Okay, so this has to be regular for it to be normal sinus rhythm. So a normal sinus rhythm is basically your blueprint. Okay, and anything that is different from this is going to be called a different kind of rhythm. And you can actually measure this rhythm. So let's try and measure it. So here, the PR interval would be 0.16, and we know that the PR interval should be between 0.12 and 0.20 seconds. Okay, so this 0.16 is between 0.12 and 0.20 seconds. So the PR interval would be normal. Okay, let's measure the QRS. Okay, so our QRS is 0.09, and we know that our QRS should measure between 0.06 and 0.10 seconds. Okay, and the QT, let's measure that too. Okay, it's 0.43. Okay, so this rhythm is normal. Those are normal values that we're getting. So this is what your normal sinus rhythm would look like. Also want to show you what it would look like in motion. So if you're looking on a monitor, this is what your normal sinus rhythm would look like. So you see that the P's are upright, you have your QRS, and you have your QT. So this is your normal sinus rhythm. You don't see anything dropped or missing. So you have all your waves there. This next rhythm is called sinus arrhythmia, aka sinus dysrhythmia, and it's basically the same as a sinus rhythm, but the only difference is that the R to R is irregular. Okay, and when the R to R is irregular, it causes the rate to also be irregular. As you can see, everything else is the same. The PR, the QRS, and the QT all have the same values as a sinus rhythm. All right, so let's take a closer look at this rhythm. So this is sinus arrhythmia, and we're going to write it SA. Okay, simple. And with this rhythm, it has all the features of your sinus rhythm, except that it's irregular. So it has the P wave. Okay, see the P waves here, and the P waves are upright. Okay, then let's change the color. We have our QRS. Okay, so the QRS is this whole thing here. Okay, we have our QRS. And let's change the color again. We have our T waves. Okay, and the T waves are upright. So those can become inverted also. So watch out for that. Those could be like this. Okay, so make sure that they're upright. And we also have our R to R. Okay, so the R to R is the distance from here to here. Okay, so this is what's different. So the R to R is different. So the distance from one QRS to another is different. Okay, so here it's different because this one is like super long compared to the rest. So these are shorter than this one. And this one is a little longer. So that's the issue with sinus arrhythmia. And I also want to take a closer look. These are R waves. Okay. And the whole thing is called a QRS. Okay. So the distance from one R to another should be equal if it is sinus rhythm. When we take a look at this, another thing that I want you to realize is that the rate is going to vary because of this arrhythmia. So when we look here from this R to another, it's going to be faster because it's shorter. Because it's shorter, it's going to be faster. Okay? But if we take a look here, it's going to be slower in this region because the distance is greater or longer, I should say. Okay, so here the rate may be like 60 beats, and then here the rate may be 70. The heart rate may be 70. So it's constantly changing. This is sinus arrhythmia on an EKG, and as you can see, in some areas the rhythm is going faster than other areas. So the heart rate here will be a little faster than this area. And this heart rate here should be changing. It's not, but it should be changing. So it'll be 78 beats, then it'll be 76 beats, maybe 79 beats, and come back down to 74 beats or something like that. So the heart rate's going to be changing with these kind of rhythms. All right, you guys, so this rhythm is bradycardia, and it looks just like a sinus rhythm, but the only difference is that the rate is different. Okay, so the rate is less than 60 beats per minute. The P waves have to be upright, and everything else is basically the same. The rhythm is regular. You have the PR, QRS, and QT, which are the same. So on our rhythm strip, we will put SB, Sinus Brady. Okay, and all the P's, the QRS, the T waves, they're all there. Okay, so everything is normal. So we have our P's here. So we have all our waves. Got your P, you have your QRS there. You have your T waves. Everything is normal. The only thing that's different is the distance between the R to R. Okay? So the distance between R to R is longer. Okay? And when the distance between the R to R is longer, the rate is slower. Okay. This is what sinus Brady looks like on a monitor. So here you can see that it basically looks like a normal sinus rhythm, but it's just slower. Okay, so the distance from one R to another is a lot longer. So that means that it's slowing down. So when the rhythm changes, the rate also changes. So the rhythm is a lot longer. That means that the heart rate is going to be a lot slower. So here with sinus rhythm, let's take a listen. Okay, so it's a lot faster than Brady. Okay, so everything else, you have the P, the QRS, the T waves, everything else is good and normal. It's just that slow rhythm. Next up is sinus tachycardia. You can call it tachy or just tachycardia. And the main difference with this one is the rate. So compared to sinus rhythm, the rate is greater than 100 beats per minute. Okay, the P wave have to be upright. The PR, QRS, and QT are the same as sinus rhythm, and the R to R is also regular. So this is a regular rhythm. The only difference is the rate. This is sinus tachycardia, and if you were writing this on a strip, you would put ST. And if you look at this rhythm, it looks just like a normal sinus rhythm, but they kind of squished it together, and those shorter waves are making it faster. Okay? So when you have shorter waves, we said it makes it faster. Okay? So everything else is the same. I mean, as a normal sinus rhythm, everything else is similar, except the fact that everything is kind of more narrow. Okay? We're kind of like shrinking it so it makes it faster and it makes everything more narrow. So we do have our P waves, but as you can see, they're more narrow. It's kind of like they got skinnier. They went on a diet or something. And we have our QRS. As you can see, the QRS is really narrow. Okay, so we have our QRS. And then we have our T waves. Okay. And also our R to R. So nothing is dropped or missing. Everything just shrunk, basically. The waves are shorter and the heart is beating faster. Okay, so you want to make sure that you pay attention to the fact that even though this rhythm is fast, it still has that P wave. This is very important because it's going to help you distinguish this very fast rhythm from a lot of other fast EKG rhythms. So this is what sinus tachycardia looks like on an EKG. As you can see, just like the normal sinus rhythm, it has the P. The P may be a little bit harder to see, but it's still there. It's visible. And the QRS is not as wide. So the QRS is narrow. So this rhythm is kind of squished together a lot more than a normal sinus rhythm. So remember, the shorter the distance between the R to R, the faster the rhythm. Okay? Remember with sinus Brady, the distance was longer. Okay, and this time the distance is shorter, so it makes it faster. Okay? And let's listen. Okay, so that's sinus tac, and this is sinus rhythm. Okay, so you can hear the difference. So the last two rhythms are a little bit different because they're actually called pauses. Okay, so this one is a sinus exit block, and the rate is going to vary because there's going to be an actual pause in the rhythm. Okay, and the P wave is still upright. The PR, the QRS, and the QT are all the same values as our sinus rhythm. And as far as the rhythm goes, the R to R is going to be regular. Okay, but it's also going to be irregular when there's a blockage. But other than that, it's going to be a regular rhythm. Okay, so when we look at this rhythm, we're not really sure what's going on. We're like, okay, we're going to the fridge, and yes, we'll get ice cream. Yes, we'll get ice cream. Pause. Do we need that ice cream? Yes, we'll get some ice cream. So with this rhythm, you're basically looking at a sinus rhythm. You do have to have an underlying rhythm. So with sinus blocks, it's not an underlying rhythm. Okay, the underlying rhythm, as you can see, is a sinus rhythm. Okay, so we do have the R to R's are regular here. They're regular, and you do have the P, the QRS, and the T wave. Okay, so you do have everything that a normal sinus rhythm have. Like throughout, you'll see that you do have the P waves throughout. You do have the QRS, and you have the T waves throughout this whole thing. Okay, the only thing that's missing, that's, well, not missing, but the only thing that's abnormal, I should say, is that this area is extra long. So we call that a pause. Okay? And there are two different types of pauses. We have a sinus arrest. And this thing does not write well. And then we have a sinus block. Okay, so we're looking at a sinus block. Okay, and let me show you what we would call this in the hospital. Okay, let's delete all this. So in the hospital, this will be called a sinus rhythm with pause. But some places would rather you put sinus rhythm. So sinus rhythm is the underlying rhythm with block or sinus block. Okay, you can put sinus block also. But you cannot just say this is a block. Okay, that's not a rhythm by itself. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I know it's a sinus block and not a sinus arrhythmia. Like I said, because you do have normal rhythms here. So it's not irregular. So the distance is not irregular. So that's how I know that it's a sinus rhythm and not a sinus arrhythmia. And let's delete all this again. Okay, so I know this is a sinus block and not a sinus arrest because we measure two consecutive R to R's. So 1, 2 is going to equal this pause. Okay? Wish I had calipers so I can show you, but it's going to equal this pause right here. So it's going to be equal to this. All right, you guys, so this is a sinus exit block. Okay, so it's sinus because we do have those P waves, they're upright. You have your QRS, you have your T waves, and everything looks pretty much normal until you get to these long pauses. Okay, so you may be thinking, okay, maybe it could be sinus arrhythmia, but it's not sinus arrhythmia because you do have normal rhythms. So here we see normal rhythms until we get to that pause. Okay, so we have our P waves, you still have your P's, but you just have an abnormally long pause. If we go back to the sinus arrhythmia, everything is abnormal. Okay, everything's irregular, I should say. Here with the sinus exit block, everything is not irregular. So you have some parts that is normal sinus rhythm, but you just have that pause. Okay, and I know that it's sinus exit block and not sinus arrest because if I measure 2 consecutive R to R's, it's going to equal this pause. And as you can see, the heart rate is going to vary. Okay, so in the places where you have normal sinus rhythm, you have a higher heart rate than these areas where you have the pauses. So the areas with the pauses, the heart rate will be around like 48, something really low, but then it will go back up once you have these regular heartbeats. All right, you guys, so we're down to our last sinus rhythm. And if you made it this far, I want you to type "not a dummy" in the comment section. All right, so this is our sinus arrest, and it's similar to a sinus exit block, but it's usually longer. Okay, so sinus arrest and sinus exit blocks are our pauses. Okay, and with sinus arrest, the rate is going to vary. The P is going to be upright. The PR, QRS, and QT will remain the same, and the R to R is also going to vary. So sometimes it'll be regular, and then there are times with the pause, with the arrest, that it's going to be irregular. All right, you guys, so this one would be sinus rhythm with arrest. Okay, so remember that with arrest, we would measure here. So just like the exit block, we're measuring 2 consecutive R to R, okay? And whatever we get here, we're gonna see if it matches up to this one, okay? So let's count the box to kind of get a rough idea. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it'll be 8, around 8 boxes. Okay, so this is just a rough estimate. And this one is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7-ish, little over 7 boxes. And this one is 7 boxes. Okay, so that obviously is not the same. Okay, that's not the same. So this will be an arrest. Okay, so if it was an exit block, if this was 7, this would be 7 also. Have your P waves are all present. You have your T waves. You have your QRS. I mean, everything else is all present. It's just that you have this pause. This is what a sinus arrest looks like on an EKG. To me, it looks more like a block, to be honest with you. Sinus arrest is usually a lot longer than sinus block. So remember that when you measure these 2 rhythms, 2 consecutive R to R, if these are measured, it will not equal the pause. Okay, it will not be the same distance as the pause. There's sinus arrest here, and that's how you know that it is sinus arrest compared to sinus block. Okay, you'll have normal beats and then something funny's happening. You'll get like a long pause.